Hey, welcome everyone to the Agency Sessions. I'm Jason Fisher, and we decided to unveil our vision to Omaha with some of the best and brightest minds in the community to be able to build a narrative around how we're going to build this content creator hub, one of the first of its kind here in Omaha. We've been cooking up this idea for years, and now it's time to involve you, the listeners. This podcast is your backstage pass to the journey. From the freshest voices to the classic minds, Agency unites us all. Join us from a what if to we will. These are the Agency Sessions, igniting your creativity and inspiring action. Buckle up. But yeah, so we'll get into this conversation a little bit, and I was trying to think of, so we're here, and pronounce your last name?
Sturgeon.
Like
okay. The fish.
Okay, so we're here with Margie Sturgeon, and so we met, where did we meet at?
So I remember first seeing you at the Omaha Film Festival. You had a submission, and one of my favorite things about the festival is the Q&As afterward.
Right.
And that's where, I feel like the community and camaraderie really shines because it's an opportunity for people to share their expertise, but also ask questions and just support filmmakers all around. So
yeah,
I can't remember what your submission was, and then I've seen you a few times there.
Right.
And then, I just like to get to know creative people. So I was like, hey. Yeah.
And I remember you bringing that up now. I couldn't remember if it was there, but then we met at a chamber event.
Yes.
But then you were telling me, hey, we know each other, or we at least cross paths at the Omaha Film Festival. And I've had a few submissions with them. Yeah. And fortunate enough to, get to a point where they were screened. And so that was exciting. A couple of them were like some ones that I did with kids. And so, for them to see it on the big screen, and I wish more would have came, but I
bet that was special though.
It was huge because they were just blown away. They just thought it was just like some little thing that they were doing. And one of them was with the Urban League specifically. And they did like 4 interviews. We had them write all the questions. They'd never done any of this stuff before, but it was about cultural literacy. And that was basically just going out to get to know people in your community.
Yes.
And so I kind of was a little confuzzled by the term cultural literacy, but I got to learn it. And so we had them write all the questions, ask the questions, and we just put up our equipment. We're like, we'll set up everything, but you got to interview and you got to have a conversation with them. And they were just so blown away. One of the people they got to interview was Dr. Marjorie Washington, who was over at the Omaha Star before she passed away some years ago. And so, and you see them now, and those kids, and I don't want to tell you, they're like probably out of college now. They were like in high school now. They're probably like doctors now because it was that long ago.
Still, where are they now?
Right. Where are they now?
Yes.
But whenever I cross paths with them as young adults now, they're just like, yeah, that was like that moment where I seen myself because we had them interview the people, and then we interviewed them about their process and their experience about doing that. Yeah. And they were just like telling their story. And that's where it kind of all began. But full circle back to meeting you all. Yeah. Where are we at today?
Where are we at today?
What is this place that we're at?
Yes. So we've come a long way from, at that point in time, I worked in news, and now my husband and we operate a little independent podcast studio.
Okay.
That's where we are today.
What's the name of it?
It's called Webberized.
Webberized. I didn't want to take the thunder away.
I know. I should say the name.
Yeah. So
my bad.
No, you're fine. So we're here at Webberized here in Omaha, Nebraska, and they say little, but it's little and it's mighty. I mean, it's well designed, it's well thought out, and anybody that I come across, as you know, now since we've met a few months ago, I keep sending more and more people here. Yeah. Because I'm just blown away, and part of that was like our interest and your background in media, my background in media, but yours is in news and journalism. Mine's just like documentaries mostly, but there's this overlap a little bit.
Absolutely.
Of all of it.
Yeah.
And so we always nerd out about all these different things that are media and news and journalism and arts and community and stories and all the things, but right?
The way they all intercorrelate.
Exactly.
They all kind of feed off each other and create community, I would say.
So Deb Bunting, we just had a podcast with her, and something that she said is like,
it's a westernized ideology that there's a separation, like compartmentalization of like culture and like art. There is, and even life, right? In other cultures that are beyond westernization, they don't separate it. There is no like arts and culture and life. It's like all seamless. So for you to say that, it's full circle, right? It's just like connectedness, right?
Yes.
And they say art imitates life, and we're like, well, no, what's the difference, right? We start realizing that looking at our media now, we're like, is this comedy? Is this art? Is this, we don't know what to call this.
Drama.
Is it drama, right? You know? And so, yeah, I wanted to find out, so your big passion while you were doing news, it was WW, or what was it?
So I started out while in college working at Fox 42 part-time. And then when I graduated, I got a job in Sioux City. And then from Sioux City, went to Tallahassee for a little bit.
Okay.
And then Orlando for a few years.
Okay.
Then came back to Omaha. I worked at a rural lifestyle TV station for a little bit. And then I worked at KMTV for a few years.
KMTV. Okay. So that you talk about you went on tour there a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I had never known that about you. And so you picked up you had your initial things, I'm sure, in high school that were of interest. Did you do any journalism or arts or anything in high school?
It's so funny you mentioned that because I just had my high school 20-year reunion.
Okay.
And as part of that nostalgia, I went and looked up it was called the Perry Teletol. Okay. And in high school, we got to write for the very back page of the Perry Chief newspaper. So the high school paper was called the Teletol. And I had like maybe 6 or 8 articles. And one of them I always remembered going after. It was about the spring play. And I remember in my head thinking, I want to write this from the perspective of not the main talent. So I purposely interviewed like the backstage director and people that weren't, in the forefront.
Main character, right? Yeah.
And so I feel like that's very early on. I've always sought voices that weren't always the ones we always hear from.
Mm-hmm.
And so
that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gosh. Yeah. That's very, beyond interesting. It's very kind of futuristic in a sense, or kind of, right?
It's definitely like where it all sprouted from, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. And so when you all started Webberized, after all the different journeys that you and your husband had in career and media and television, it has been, very, very full circle in a sense of like being able to magnify those voices or having people who now are not the main character, but can become their own main character. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. So I had came up with this idea. It was after, and what we've been talking about on all these podcasts that you've been helping us with, is this idea that there is this kind of disconnect in modern media, right? Each generation of media is something new. It's come from film or radio, film. Written word, right? And some of those stay around. Some of those recirculate. Records have come back, right? And it depends on how, again, those mediums or media is archived or preserved, preservation. I know even the Library of Congress, right, has a huge arm in that of like, supposedly, I don't remember, years ago, they, I don't know if this is true, but they really had a huge arm in archival and like maybe all the books, or like they would try to purchase or be in touch with all the books. But the point being is that I realized that like in modern media, this is the first time that there's never been like a person or a group of people or enough organizations that were out there to like preserve the video, kind of video and media. I paused for a minute because I was thinking also, it's like, well, who recorded radio?
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, all
How many conversations were on there that were not saved, right? It was just live broadcast and it wasn't recorded. It was just in the airwaves, as they say, right? But we have a chance now. We have something that has a little shelf life to it. We're in that small window of video and everything else, but I realized how many people were disappearing in my lifetime. Yeah. Now I'm only 47, in dog years, but but I think that just hit me a little different of thinking this wasn't ancient Egypt,
Mm-hmm.
And media's gone. And so what's your thoughts on any of that?
Well, it's definitely a lack of infrastructure for preserving what we're putting out there, whether it's from journalism or to our own personal media of photos and stuff that we're sharing on social media
100%.
or putting on our own blogs, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
We're left up to the positive or negative intent of like these content management systems. So like if you have a WordPress blog, unless you maintain like the payments for it, it could disappear.
Sure.
If you have a podcast, unless you maintain the payments for the hosting, it could disappear.
I've had clients that happened to where we did a website for them and it disappeared because they didn't keep up with it. Yes.
Yeah. So like just that easy little break and it's gone.
It's gone.
So, and then you think about it on the bigger level when it comes to like local media, if the newsroom doesn't have practices in place for preserving news of the day or stuff that they post online, it's not a priority. And so if there aren't policies and procedures in place, it's not going to happen.
Sure. Because it is costly. It is timely. It is all the things. And even if it's like super easy, it's still consumption of like hard drive space and all the things. It's an extra step.
And still they're relying on third party corporations or whatever. Sure. So like when I worked at Cape TV,
right.
You have access to the analytics, and so you can make sort of data-driven content decisions.
Yeah.
And one of the things I've always noticed is like every year there's an annual interest in the 1975 tornado that tore through.
Sure.
So we go to the archive, we digitize like all the raw that we had, and it is really compelling stuff. And there's no like real context to it either. Like there's no voiceover. It was just all the raw. And so
pictures worth 1,000 words. You've seen everything because I've seen a couple stills.
Buildings and people just walking amongst it, and we don't know who these people were.
Sure.
And so you could crowdsource, like make that an initiative once you put it out there.
Sure.
But then you have to rely on YouTube or something similar to house it or give it a place to live on the internet. And say YouTube, suddenly, heaven forbid, disappears.
Sure.
Like, then what resource do we have?
No, you're absolutely right. And I mean, at any time, I think, one thing I really think about is redundancy, and having multiple mediums. I've heard a lot of different things from, doomsday media people. They're like quartz disc and all this stuff. And I nerded out on that for a little bit. And I was like, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but it is something to think about. But redundancy is about it because I was, the thing probably both of us look at now is like we're looking at a lot of streamed content. And more we keep seeing these movies from Warner Brothers pop up and from this place pop up from the 70s and 60s and 50s and everything else. And we're asking ourselves, how does it look so good? Because they knew, and I guarantee there's a lot of horror stories on the back end. Those are only the movies that we know made it through whatever even those big companies made it through that were preserved. And then were digitized and now are on streaming platforms and in clouds and everything else.
Yeah.
So we've seen it happen. We've seen it in CDs and DVDs and Blu-rays and HD videos and all the things. And
physical media,
right? So, I think with that being said too, on a smaller scale, like I went to go look just as like I was talking to somebody, and I've been talking to a lot of somebodies about agency and about just kind of this whole like media, like, but I looked up, I was like, we're in Omaha, we're in Nebraska. What's some of the biggest things that are out here that are known to the life of like Nebraska? And it popped in my head of like, let me look up the 90s Huskers. I'm not even a big football person.
Yeah.
I said, but let me go look this up. So I Googled it, looked on YouTube, looked on Google, looked at everything else. None of our grandest, because we don't have pro football, we don't have anything else. And so I've shared this a billion times, but you can't find good luck on finding a Huskers game from the 90s from Tom Osborne.
Right.
And if that's not online, about the culture of Nebraska, which is like our biggest sanctuary of, all things possible.
Yeah.
What does that say about just the local news? I mean, fortunately, like you said, the 75 tornado was privately archived and has been kept up to some extent.
Right.
It's been digitized and hopefully transferred to different mediums, but we're at the whim. So whether it's YouTube or Google or another service or a third party or our hard drive, redundancies there. And I think that's the only way we can kind of maybe make sure that things are somewhat safe on there. But it takes a lot of us. It takes a village of creatives and of people who are passionate about it. But I think we thought more would be out there.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, I digress. And the realization was that there were many people before me that I ran into in North Omaha who were artists. They were photographers. They were video folks. They were directors. And they never said it to me directly, but all of a sudden I realized like, well, who's going to tell their story?
Yeah.
And why is the disconnect? If we don't have like, and I'm just saying Huskers as being such a big thing. I'm not saying like that's our whole goal, but if we don't have that, then why are we shouldn't be surprised on why younger generations also don't understand what our parents and other people and us may have lived through, because it doesn't exist to them. If it's not online to them and it's not in a medium that they're engaged in, like social media or something like that, or an app or something, it doesn't exist in their reality. Why would they ever know? It's like us knowing what happened in ancient Egypt only until they uncover the ruins. And then, like you said, there's no real actual story for it. We're just reading between the lines or making up narratives.
Yeah. Well, and part of that too is passing down the institutional knowledge that you gain.
Yeah.
Like working in news for so long in Omaha.
Sure.
You're going to know the history of what happened on this street corner more so than someone who, is just coming into the newsroom or just moving to Omaha.
What do you think institutional memory, institutional knowledge, those types of things? Break that down for people, because I'll tell you what, I think I probably learned that word a few years ago from Ben about politics.
Okay.
It was institutional memory.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Right.
Like the ability for someone who's been in a organization for so long to pass along like knowledge about policy, procedure, or just history. So you have like the background information to make better informed decisions about the future.
Sure. Absolutely. And sometimes, it's come in with a clean slate, but it's also good to have a fresh perspective.
Yeah. You need both, really.
But you need both, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so with that in mind, I think to myself, like, okay, so how do we get the next generation? And that's where agency was really kind of spawned from.
Yes.
It was like, okay, so they have phones and they're using apps and they're doing the things and they're telling all their stories and sharing their art and doing everything through these different mediums and platforms.
Yeah.
But we're not really, as the establishment of generational establishment, maybe not taking this as seriously enough to help them magnify and engage them in a way that, resonates with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the idea of like coming up with a bunch of different video studios and podcast studios and places to where they can do dance, they can do whatever it is that they want to create, even physical media still, and, painting and everything, but just having a lot of little spaces and places like this, and people like yourselves and your husband and everything, to where they can be, I guess, I don't want to say uplifted. I don't like to say that, but I guess uncover what's already inside them, give, agency.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden there's this like the seed that's planted and watered and nurtured in the way that it needs to be. Right. Mm-hmm. And then I'm curious to see what happens from there when we have something like that. And then I looked up and there's not any really space or place like that, especially not kind of woven into the preservation and the continuation of like media through, arts and journalism and all the different things. Like there's nothing like it. There's no social media, like I was going to use like kind of a recreational center for social media, or just, there's nothing really like it.
Community is really what it boils down to. When you talk about your project, what I picture in my head is a young person coming to the location, right? But having access to one of Ben Gray's shows where they talked about the issue that maybe is being experienced even today that they're trying to speak about or educate people on. And then they can just build off of that and create their own story for today's environment. Like that's the kind of vision that pops into my head when you describe it.
What happens when those types of things start getting out here to, I mean, because we know how social media impacts, right? Because I mean, there's the bullying, there's all the, you know, the gossip, and there's all the other things. But what happens when now all of a sudden that, you know, someone who's younger finds something out about like that, you know, because they get excited quickly, like they, you know.
Yeah.
Right. So what happens now that, because we get excited, I mean, they get excited and they're like, wow, this person was like right back here, or this person was over here. What do you think when those types of experience happen? What type of impact do you think that has?
It's so interesting. I think it builds a better connection between the generations. And the most recent example I can think of is on TikTok right now. There is a young influencer who is just excited to tell the world about how she just learned about Lilith Fair. And then people my age or older are like, you're just now learning about this. Oh, you sweet child, like you missed out.
And I mean, how else would they know? Like, it's kind of like, again, any mass media, right? It's propaganda or whatever the case may be. But if we don't put it in a space or place for them to find it, like that's right.
Yeah. And going back to your Husker story, like if we put out there footage of all of us who went out to 72nd Street on the night of the championship and like filled the intersection. Yeah. Like I haven't really looked that hard, but I haven't seen that kind of footage.
What does that do for a city?
Do kids even know?
Like, that's your city.
Yeah.
Right.
You know. And it's
been a lot of pride, right?
And it's got new context for younger people now after 2020 and the protests and everything. So there's opportunity to build upon it in today's environment.
Yeah, I got goosebumps when thinking about that. Like, gosh, yeah. I can't even put it to words in a sense of like that type of impact and seeing, like you said, 2020. The protest then, the same intersection there, celebration, and that our city, you know, being so active and like, that's my city, you know, and it gives me faith in humanity at times. You know, I want to see our failures. I want to see our success. That's just me. I'm kind of a realist. Yeah. And so when I see those things, it gives me faith in humanity and myself a little bit more. It gives me a little bit more groundedness of expectations on each other, a little bit more patience at times, because again, all of those different areas to where, you know, a person can, or a community can, you know, find themselves and find their heart. I don't know, anything else that you can think of that, you know, what about like, okay, so we were talking about KPAO and not, again, different places that have access to connecting to next generation. Yeah. Like what's kind of happening with like other organizations or places and spaces like that generationally. Yeah.
So KPAO has a lot of opportunity. It's definitely an underutilized resource in the Omaha community. Sure. But it's still a full functioning TV studio. People can make 28-minute programs for free, Omaha residents. Sure. And it's pretty awesome with how far it's come.
Why do you think it's underutilized though? I mean, generationally right now.
Yeah. So there's an opportunity to further embrace like our social media platforms, our website, and just community building relationships. Sure. And further support like building that community in Omaha with all those different methods.
100%.
But when you do find it, it's a gem. And once you make your program, it'll air on Cox Cable, and then you can do with it what you want. So you can put it on your YouTube channel, you can splice it up and put it on your social media platforms. Like, nice. So if you've got a project, a passion project, or a community storytelling sort of thing, like that's the place to go.
Okay. Okay. gosh, as you say that now, I'm kind of like, well, maybe we put this on there. I don't know, because I'm like, I mean, I'd love to record over there, but I'm kind of like thinking like maybe, because at the end of the day, like we are trying to bridge a lot of different channels, and we talk about redundancy, which is like having more than one plan. And I'm like, okay, yeah. So and that's the goal, is like to get the word out to different audiences,
I would add to that. So you know me, I'll go out and tell people, you should do this on KPAO. And I've gotten a few people, to do programs there. And like one of them was like a comedy show, improv comedy.
Okay.
And then they come back to me later and like, you'd be surprised how many people have come up to me and been like, I saw you on TV.
That's hilarious.
Because you think in this day and age, cord cutters have just basically utterly destroyed cable.
Sure.
But there's still like,
there's a good audience.
Waiting rooms and things like that where cable's on. So
no, absolutely. No, I didn't even think about that. Again, different channels for different audiences. And there are still a lot of people who are in their like mode, like this is my thing, or I don't even think twice about it. I've been paying this for 50 years. So let's just keep this as part of one of my
or it's
go-tos.
Bundled with something.
Yeah, exactly. So we get all the things, we change the world. What does that do for Omaha? We plant some seeds like this, and we get like a lot of youth and a lot of people connected to our story. We find out about our story. What does that do for the rest of the world? I mean, we got influencers now that we're home growing here through a place like Agency. What do you imagine that will look like?
I think it makes Omaha a scene. Omaha was known as a music scene.
Yeah.
I think there's opportunity for Omaha to evolve into just a scene of all things arts, creativity, and community.
Sure. So we hear about this brain drain, and you left Omaha,
I did,
right? And your husband left Omaha. I've left Omaha. What brought you back?
Family.
Same with me. Same with me. And I think it was just the contrast of like family, but then I realized like, okay, this is kind of like, I always, you don't get to choose your city. It chooses you because where you're born at, right? But I think as an adult, then I came back after seeing a little bit of the world, not nearly as much as you all did, but I have seen a little bit. I lived in Houston after college, lived in Lincoln. I even lived in LA for about a year.
Yeah.
Traveled a good amount. And what brought me back here is I felt like I was on a startup.
Okay.
Omaha felt like a startup. I was like, I see now, especially living in Houston, it's kind of Midwestern-ish. It's at the bottom of the thing, but they were way ahead of the curve as far as growth wise.
Sure.
And when I seen that, I was thinking to myself like, okay. And I had this, it was kind of a little side job. So I went to school for engineering, but after that I was down in Houston, and you have to work temp jobs. To get into any company. And I didn't have any, connections out there like I do here in Omaha, because it's easier to get connections here in Omaha. But I was working at the side job while I was working at another job at a place. And the job was like a sales job for ADT. And you go door to door and try to sign people up for alarm sales for ADT alarms in Texas. In the heat.
Right. Yeah.
So what I learned from that, though, is they would show like this whole map of Houston, which is a giant spider web, basically, of like interstates and everything else. And there were rings. And that's how it was explained to me. Cities grow in rings.
Okay.
So it starts out as a little bubble, way back in the 1800s or something or whatever. And then it starts expanding out. And then it starts going back into itself if they can't annex anymore. And if Houston, it's like, I think back when I lived there was 2000, it was like 8,000 plus people, and it's more than that now. But you go there and there's like, you could be in Houston, but it's almost like being in Gretna, getting annexed by Omaha, being annexed by, Fremont, being, and all these different, and at one point in time, then it's just, well, that's the area, like that's Benson, and Benson used to be its own thing, right? And Blackstone used to be its own little city. It was a Gretna of, of Omaha. But so now it's just like, you don't even think twice about it. It's, this is the district.
Yeah.
Yep. And so that's kind of the way Houston is. I say all that to say is like, that's what I see with a lot of the Omaha growth, and I see it as a startup, and I kind of felt like I see where this can go. And so when I moved back because of family, it was like this aha moment of, now I didn't have any idea about where we're headed right now, but I just knew that like, okay, I feel like I can take over the world here in Omaha. Houston, I felt like I was drowning. You had to definitely not only know some people, but you know, it was a full-time rat race, like all the time. You had to drive an hour and a half just to get to the job and an hour and a half to get back to the job. And they didn't have mass transportation, you know, all the things wrong with the city that big, you know?
Yeah.
And it hasn't gotten much better, but I digress to say, painting a big picture of traveling and things of that nature, I realized then what Omaha had as far as those things. And so I think that you're absolutely right that it can build community with you know, media, that this will be no longer a brain drain, but it will be a brain magnet.
Yes.
Because we leave, you know, many of my friends, many of your friends and associates, like they leave, they go, where have some of your friends went to?
Oh gosh. Well, so my situation's a little different because like from high school, I didn't go to high school in Omaha.
Okay.
But from college, I mean, most of them stayed in Omaha.
Okay. That's pretty good then.
Yeah.
Yeah. They say it's, you know, they say it's kind of like like it depends on where the group is.
Yeah.
But you probably know a handful of people that has like, okay, I moved to this place. Or if they felt like they were like, Omaha Film Festival is a perfect example of like, if I want to make it big, what are some of the cities you got to go to?
They all moved to LA, occasionally New York.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So LA, New York, I've known a few people that have done film with me.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, what happened to them? Like they were great crew members and everything else.
Yeah.
And they moved, right?
Yeah.
And the scene doesn't grow here. Now it has grown quite a bit because of places like the Omaha Film Festival, Benson Film Festival's kind of grown a little bit. So we need that healthy competition too, but a platform like this does a lot, right?
Creating a sense of place.
Sense of place. I like that. I'm gonna use that as well. I like that because it's so simple, but it's very true.
It's needed. It's needed. I mean, just from moving away and coming back, you know, and coming home, like that sense of place that you can come back to and feel like home.
Yeah.
And that's incorporated in what history brings to the table, and then what the youth bring to the table.
Yeah. Speak more on that. Like, I want to know, so we have a place like this and this becomes a destination. Do you think people then would, I mean, since there aren't, if we do this now, right?
Yeah.
And we plant a seed now, and we're the ones who engage youth in all the different ways that they can be through a medium that they're like is the biggest thing going. We looked at the demographics. It's like 8 to like 38 or something like that want to be social influencers. So, you know, I don't know what you wanted to be when you grew up or when they asked you that when you were a kid. What do you remember your answer?
I wanted to be an author.
Pretty close.
Yeah.
Have you authored anything?
Oh, no. I mean, I write.
Okay.
You know.
So you author quite a bit in different ways.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, but nobody said like they wanted to be an author, a social influencer, right? And that's that. Like, sure, everybody wanted to be a Stephen King or someone else, right? You know, the famous author. But you were happy if you just made it, you know?
Yeah.
I think at my time, at least that's where I was at. For a long time with my thing, I never expected to get into film. I wasn't even interested in film.
Yeah.
I was more of an illustrator and drawing person.
Okay.
And film just kind of landed in my lap and it made sense. And so fast forward, we plant these seeds, right, with these kids and these youth and young adults and such, and even ourselves. And, you know, all of a sudden it creates a place. Would you say it was a sense of place?
Yeah. Sense of place.
Sense of place. I love it. I love it. Anything else you can think of that, you know, kind of connects to this or like comes to mind with, anything social media? I do like you to go back to your point on how, a little bit of ownership and a little bit of, awareness of our social media platforms.
Yeah.
Like we talked about how if we pass away,
oh yeah,
all of our media and data, right, is kind of, you know, caught up there in the thing. Yeah.
Not even as permanent as that. If you say the wrong thing, you can be deplatformed.
Deplatformed is a huge thing right now.
And then you lose all of even that community that you've built or your media that you've put on there. So like every once in a while, make sure to download your profile, so you can save that like in a Google Drive and that sort of thing.
Throw file.
Profile. Save your profile.
Okay, I think you
Yeah,
said throw file. I
sorry.
was like, oh, is that a technical term? I didn't even know you could. So that's very helpful that you say that, because deplatforming is a big thing,
Yeah.
and sometimes because of all the nuances of tech and rules and regulations, you don't even know. Like I've ran into people and they don't even like what happened.
Well, and then the other thing too, like in journalism, if you're writing, like if you're in the industry and your story ends up, on the website, you also probably want your own copy for yourself, because that link could die
Sure.
the moment that your station or news organization redesigns the website.
There you go. And yeah, we talked about that. So just being a keeper of one's own content.
Yes.
What do they call that? I'm trying to think, and I don't want to say archivist. That sounds too over the top.
But
But
that is
it
the
really
core
is.
of it. It's hard to figure out, and I'm still trying to figure it out just personally too. And I feel like it's something podcasting brings to the table as well, like oral family history archives. And if I were more tech savvy, I would be designing a software for individuals.
I'm taking notes. Hold on.
I know.
All right. Yeah.
This is let's talk more about this, but like a software for people to like save their photos and then save a description so we know who's in it and put
The meta tags. And all that
yes,
stuff.
like
Yeah.
so it's a searchable database, and then you could share it with family without having to be on a social media platform. So then you don't have to worry about all the challenges that come with social media, like privacy and just ownership of your content and things like that.
I'm old enough to remember there was Black Planet, which was a social media platform, and then there was MySpace.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, I think probably like 5-10 years ago or something. I don't know. Time has no shape or form after a while.
Right.
And I ran into my MySpace profile.
Oh, what was that like for you?
That was pretty interesting. I looked slimmer and trimmer a little bit there, and a little bit more gold teeth. And and so, you as you're a kid, you experiment with some things. And so it was interesting though. And I was surprised that some of my stuff was still around. Like it was a handful of things, but I was like, oh, this is where that's where I started my business at, really. It was, I was doing a lot of projects for musicians and everything else.
Okay. Yeah.
So I was doing artwork for them, and I was like, oh, I forgot about this. And even back then I was kind of a hoarder. Like every time a hard drive would get to a point, I remember having a few hard drives fail on me, and I was able to save most of them.
Oh.
And it's scary. So they're just, if anything, teaching these kids to understand the value of what they do.
Yeah.
So if they're going to make content, sure, go do your social media, do that. And some of it I don't want to remember. I'm sure,
Look back on, what was I thinking there?
Yeah, exactly. I don't
Yes.
want to remember myself with the gold teeth, but I get every once in a while says, oh, that was the guy. But it's great to see us grow up or change or evolve and those sort of things. But, the other part is the value of it. And like when we look at mainstream Hollywood, again, when we're looking at streaming and everything else, we're like, how do these films look so good? Because they had the people who knew and understood the value of, we can still get more money out of this, or this could still be relevant, and we're going to release this today. And so I see more and more movies come up on, platforms that are streaming platforms. And I know that those people who run those companies, if those tapes and media is still around, or those film reels are around, that they know the value of that media. If not, someone will bring it up like yourself and say, Chevy Chase just came out with another movie and he's kind of up there. We should probably release some of his stuff. And, and so they start doing that. And the point of that being is that with youth understanding the value of their content, of what they create, of being creators, it's kind of their retirement plan too. I didn't realize this too from some folks, that a lot of the media that I'm archiving now, that is my retirement plan. That is the torch passed, is that I'm the bearer of that media, to be able to make sure. And if it's profitable, that means that it's going to get published and it's going to put somewhere else. So it's a necessary evil of the profit side of it. But at the same time, that's the goal, is to make sure that it stays alive. So,
and accessible.
Accessibility. Yeah. And making sure, accessibility is the opposite of just like putting gates up and saying it's this and that. But when we can make it super accessible, then other youth and other people can say, oh, wow, okay. And they may not say it out loud, but when I seen other people, like so I used to draw a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and I used to draw Marvel stuff, but all I seen was Bob Ross, because art wasn't a big thing back when I was a kid. You know, it kind of was, but it kind of wasn't. I think the only gallery I knew about was like that little funny, well, it's the Co-op gallery that's by the old market. That's in the old market. It's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
One of my mom's friends, I cannot think of her name, was a pottery person and did all their stuff there.
Uh-huh.
And so I was just like, you know what? I don't want to do pottery. I don't want to paint happy little trees. And I don't know anybody who works at Marvel.
Oh.
So I just settled for being an engineer. My mom never talked me out of it. It was just like, I didn't want to. I was like, where am I going to? I'm not good enough to be in Marvel. I didn't, and didn't know anybody at Marvel. So I say that to say, though, is like my mom and my other family members were pretty good archivists, and, had photo albums and such. And I have some of those on my wall.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, though, paints a narrative of a lot of different things. And it gives a lot of sense of pride and a lot of sense of agency to oneself, to where they realize that was always within them. But even if it's a silent film of a tornado,
yeah,
when you see things like that, it sets things in perspective, right? With no words at all,
right,
of having that. So that's what I'm hoping that these youth can find, is what's already there, and find more of it, and find it within each other, because that's where it's at. Yeah.
And build on it.
Yeah.
Cool.
I don't know. Anything else?
No, I think that's great.
Okay. Well, I'd probably talk most of the thing, but I appreciate you
No, that's great.
sharing your insight on there.
Buckle
All
up.
right. Thanks,
Enjoy it.
Margie.
Thank you.
All right.